Oh, what the hell? Look at Dan.
Now, the very important thing I told my daughter and granddaughters, no serious guys in your 30s.
Okay.
Right?
No what?
No serious guys in your 30s.
I'll keep that in mind. At least.
All right, guys, so we got to follow up on the story about the NBC reporter, whom is facing massive backlash from the mainstream liberal media and blue check Twitter for doing the job of a journalist and telling the truth about John Fetterman's condition, or put it this way, their experience with John Fetterman, as John Fetterman, who is running for Senate in Pennsylvania against Dr. Oz. He had a stroke, and allegedly he is experiencing problems from his stroke. Now, this NBC reporter did an interview with John Fetterman, and before that interview, she was trying to make small talk with Mr. Fetterman, and apparently she had a hard time speaking with Mr. Fetterman because allegedly, he had a hard time understanding words. And the reporter said that on TV.
We had a monitor set up so that he could read my questions because he still has lingering auditory processing issues as a result of the stroke, which means he has a hard time understanding what he's hearing. Now, once he reads the question, he's able to understand. You'll hear he also still has some problems, some challenges with speech. And I'll say, Katie, that just in some of the small talk prior to the interview, before the closed captioning was up and running, it did seem that he had a hard time understanding our conversation. Saw and heard there the auditory processing challenges, the speech challenges. I've spoken with stroke experts. They say folks can fully recover from that. But the caveat that every expert gives is that they can't fully assess a patient without details on their health records, without that information that the campaign has yet to disclose. We've asked multiple times for medical records. We've asked for interviews with someone from his medical team. Those requests have so far been denied to NBC News and other outlets that have requested this as well.
And the woke mob got upset.
I can't believe I have to say this. Needing to use assistive technology does not disqualify you from political office. For those of you who don't know, I'm referring to an ableist interview of John Fetterman by NBC. They horrifyingly assert that John Fetterman's unfit to be a senator because he needs captions. But what people keep forgetting is that we have several disabled serving Congress members in the state of Pennsylvania, like Representative Hohenstein, who uses hearing aids and captions, and Senator Tartaglione, who uses a wheelchair, as well as the first ever deaf mayor of a city, Neil McDevitt, who's the mayor of North Wales, uses ASL's native language, interpreters, and captions. So by all means, critique John Fetterman's policy, please. But let's not go down that dangerous rabbit hole of assuming that he can't do his job because he needs captions.
I feel like I'm going to get better and better every day. And by January, I'm going to be...
Okay, so you make mention that this interview was conducted with closed captioning, and then you go on to question him as if his stroke has made him incapable of doing the job because he has auditory processing delay. As if you're saying because of the stroke, and because he needs help processing the words that we're using, he is unfit for office. That's not the case. That is very ableist, and you are weird for doing this. You put closed captioning on your video. Are you suggesting that your audience that needs or uses this closed captioning is unable to process what you're doing? Because if that's the case, you absolutely need to go over your philosophy again.
NBC should be deeply embarrassed of this interview. To suggest that John Fetterman is unfit to run for office because he uses closed captions is untrue, ableist, and frankly irresponsible. People across this country and across the world use closed captions because they are deaf, hard of hearing, or have trouble with auditory processing. It doesn't make them any less unfit for the jobs they do or unqualified to hold a position.
So they're upset, calling the journalist ableist, and of course in the mainstream liberal media, they're also attacking the journalist as well, as The View basically said that it's the journalist's fault that she can't engage in small talk, not John Fetterman.
people aren't understanding the processing part. So when she said that thing about how he didn't necessarily understand her in small talk, the auditory processing doesn't matter if it's a short sentence or a long sentence, simple words or complex words. It's an auditory processing problem. So unless she was speaking small talk in closed captions, he was not going to understand. That's the issue.
I actually thought it was inappropriate that she said during small talk before our interview.
Maybe she's bad at small talk. Maybe it was her.
Maybe it's her. I just feel that, you know, I don't know if it was an off-the-record conversation, if the entire interview was off the record, but I know, Sarah, you've interviewed people. We interview people and we have small talk before. That is generally not something that you mention during when you're being interviewed by an anchor. The other thing that I had a problem with when she's describing all of this, I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but I love closed caption. I watch all of my series closed caption because I can't sometimes understand the accents that people are using, and I don't understand things, and it's very helpful in terms of processing, and I don't have a cognitive disorder. And so that's the second thing. And the last thing I'll say, I don't think she's like a neurosurgeon or a neurologist, but my friend Sanjay Gupta is, and Sanjay Gupta said the following. Sanjay Gupta said processing issue is not a comprehension issue, as Sarah just said. He says he does not appear to have a problem with cognition. He's responding quickly. He supposedly took a couple of tests where he performed well on those tests. He does not appear to have a problem with understanding.
Yeah, so Sunny claims she doesn't have a mental disorder, and I just want to say I respectfully disagree with your characterization of your mental condition, Sunny. I respectfully disagree. But again, the mainstream liberal media does what the mainstream liberal media does. They smear this reporter for simply stating what her opinion is on John Fetterman and a conversation that she had with the guy. Again, she felt that the conversation was so off. There was something so wrong with it that she needed to tell the world about it. Okay, she felt obligated to do so. And I don't see the problem with that. But ever since she did that, she has become public enemy number one for the Democrats. And nobody is more upset about this NBC reporter exposing John Fetterman than John Fetterman's wife, Gisele Fetterman, who melted down in leaked audio in which she advocated for the NBC reporter to face consequences for her actions. Take a look.
With that interview yesterday, when the journalist sort of took some liberties with her sort of supposition of his health, how did you feel?
I don't like saying rage because I think that's a really unhealthy feeling. And when you feel those things, it only harms yourself. But I just, what a disservice that she did to not only my husband, but to anyone facing a disability and working through it. And I don't know how there were not consequences, right? I mean, there are consequences for folks in these positions who are any of the isms. I mean, she was ableist, and that's what she was in her interview. It was appalling to the entire disability community, and I think to journalism. So I was shocked. I'm still really upset about it. And I think the positive is it's brought a lot of conversations around accommodations, around rights, around ableism, right? I mean, ableism was trending on Twitter. It just shows there's so much work to do, but these networks have to take accountability, right? Like, where is your training?
Right.
It was appalling to see. And you see that in schools, you see that with young children. You don't expect to see it at this level. And, I haven't heard an apology. It hasn't come. I am hopeful that, they will reflect and see that they did an incredible disservice to all Americans.
Yeah, so according to John Fetterman's wife, we know she doesn't have any biases, right? This NBC reporter did a disservice to all Americans by sounding the alarm on her husband's inability to have a simple conversation. That is what this woman is saying. And saying that this journalist should face consequences. She should be punished for saying that about her husband. And it's like, so now the Democrats are advocating for journalists to be punished for doing their jobs because they said something that's not politically positive or politically convenient for you. So is that what you're saying? You're saying journalists should be punished for saying negative things about Democrats? That's exactly what she's advocating for. And I guarantee you, the way she feels is the exact same way a lot of these people in the mainstream liberal media feel about this NBC journalist, right? They're like, look, we all know he has a mental condition, but you're not supposed to say that out loud. because it's going to hurt our chances of winning. We don't care if the guy is actually mentally fit enough to be in office. We don't care about that. We just want to win, right? And speaking of winning in the race, as of right now, Dr. Oz is closing the lead a little bit on Fetterman, as Fetterman is up 5.7 points right now over Dr. Oz, according to 538 and their composites of all the polling data. So, you know, it remains to be seen whether or not this gaffe is really going to make that big of a difference in regards to this NBC report. But I must say this. If you're a normal person and you're seeing this, right? You're seeing that this person can barely have a conversation, that he can barely understand things. Again, allegedly, it's not a comprehension problem, right? It's another issue. But regardless, you're seeing stuff like this. How can you come out here and vote for that, right? Look at Joe Biden that's running the country right now. I mean, the guy is having some of the same issues, right? I mean, obviously, Joe Biden, I think, is in much worse condition than John Fetterman. But again, this guy, Joe Biden, is an embarrassment. Look at what happened to this country. Look how we're being embarrassed on the world stage. We're on the verge of nuclear war. And part of the reason is because world leaders know that we don't have a coherent person in the White House, whether it be the president or the vice president. And you want to put more incoherent people in Congress? You want to send John Fetterman to Congress? Again, I wish the best for the guy. I hope he recovers. I hope he makes a full recovery. But when it's clear that you're still recovering and that recovery is causing you some issues, I think that it's best for him to sit this out. It's best not to send him to Congress. But no. Democrats, though, would rather infringe on your First Amendment right. They'd rather punish journalists, call for the punishment of journalists, which is something that they do in third world countries, right? That's what they do. When journalists come out here against the regime, right, when they report on facts that don't fit the regime's narrative, they say, hey, those journalists should face consequences. Again, in some countries, that means execution, right? Again, I'm not necessarily saying that Fetterman's wife is going that far, but what I'm saying, it's a slippery slope. But where it starts is where you're trying to silence journalists simply for doing journalism, right, and giving an opinion on a situation they face when they talk to a candidate and they felt like, okay, this candidate is incoherent. He's so incoherent that I should report on this. And she did her job. But again, as you can see, any reporter that speaks out against the regime, against the Democrat narrative, you see what happens to him. Everybody in the media starts attacking that person, which is why all of these journalists always are in lockstep with the Democrat Party. Because any journalist that steps out of line with the Democrat Party, they get whipped, right? Like they're whipping this lady. They're doing the proverbial whip. Happens every single time, right? So with that being said, again, Democrats once again showing that they're not the party for free speech. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.